I've taken a moment to catch up with Mark Massetti from Carbon Management Services. Now, Mark, thank you for joining me again.
Thanks, Danny.
Now, carbon has been in the news, it's been in the headlines, hasn't it? There's so much going on with it at the moment, with the conference in Paris, with ESOS, changing of pricing to carbon in the UK as well. So what's your take on it?
Well, there is a lot going on, and it'd be wrong of me to say I'm an expert, but I kind of, maybe I ought to get out more, but I do read a lot about this. The views on what's happening in Paris, some people are saying it will change, some people it won't change. I think it's now got such visibility that climate change is really top of the agenda. And an article I was reading in The Economist says that people like credit rating agencies are starting to now try to value carbon assets and whether or not they can actually be realised, like oil companies and coal mining businesses. So they're starting to decarbonise, and they're starting to penalise organisations that are heavily reliant on carbon. And that's going to, the thing is, if governments don't do anything and the markets do, that will have more power, because when your share price starts to go down, right, and because the markets are unloading your shares, no government intervention will help. So, the markets start to decarbonise and people will notice it. So we've got to really start to look to be serious about reducing our CO2 emissions.
So talking about ESOS, lots of companies have had to go through it now, and it's ended, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So
or not, as the case may be.
Or not. So are there any extra developments on that?
Well, the claim was, when 18 months notice was given, that anybody who fell into the criteria of ESOS had to have an ESOS survey. There was 18 months notice. The deadline, I think, was the 5th of December. There weren't enough lead assessors. There weren't enough people to sign this thing off. And basically what the government said was, or DEC said, if you don't get it done, it's a £50,000 fine. We were with a client today who missed the boat, but because the government has extended the deadline to the 29th of January, everyone's got off the hook. Now, everyone was saying that they wouldn't extend it, but they have done. So the Energy Savings Opportunity or Obligation Scheme is in its second phase now. So what businesses thought was it was just a tick box exercise that needed to be signed off at board level, typically by a finance director. Phase 2 is now going to be about implementation. I mean, people can't imagine the government just wanted to know what you were going to do just for the sake of it. So phase 2 will now be to implement those. And this is all fitting in nicely with a strategy of reducing CO2, reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. That's just the way it is. And the final point, which was an article I read, and it looked like it'd been written in government speak, is I think there's something like 40 different schemes going at the moment which are energy related, in terms of payments for this, subsidies for that. There's a whole host of them, and it's unwieldy and really complicated. So what they're doing is they're going to simplify it all, and really that's the way it should be. People need to know where they stand. It's almost as bizarre as the tax regime. You get organisations that are big emitters that don't get punished, and you get small organisations that do. And if everybody kind of had, a sliding scale on their CO2 emissions, it would just encourage them to reduce their consumption. And it's as simple as that. We don't have enough generating capacity. If we go all electric cars in the next 20 years, we won't have enough capacity to charge them. So I've no idea where it's going to end up. But what we do know is that people need to reduce energy, and we need to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. That's the way it's going, and it will only get more and more expensive. So, start now rather than wait until you get fined.
Are we going in the right direction?
Oh, I've no idea. I don't think the government knows. No. Nobody knows what's around the corner. The problem is that we've got unreliable renewables, so wind and solar. When we need our energy the most is typically between 4:30 and 6:30, 7 o'clock during the winter months, Monday to Friday. That's when we're at our worst place for capacity. So DEC and the government are trying to find ways to manage that. And as we've talked about in the previous video, if you can't produce the energy, why don't you constrain it? If you find someone who's prepared to turn off their power so that it can be used somewhere else, then pay them a lot of money to do so. And it almost becomes now that, you could almost be in a situation where it would be better for a business that wasn't running 24 hours a day to not be open during the day and to manufacture in the small hours where energy's cheaper and where they could be paid to turn off assets during prime time. It may come to that. So, interesting times, an interesting opportunity to reduce consumption and save money, and save a lot of money. So, that's the direction. That's the direction we're moving in. Yeah.
And there are supposed to be changes in carbon pricing here in the UK.
Sure.
So have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it would be easier if there were one price.
Right.
If everybody knew that you paid a price for carbon, and this sort of business model where the more you buy, the cheaper it gets with energy, I think needs to change, because most people get a standing charge and kilowatts at a certain price, and then other kilowatts at the more you use, the less it gets. What they're looking at is, some people have said what we ought to be doing is having a baseline for you. The more you use, the more you pay. And that happens with a thing called the triad system now, which is available on some energy bills, where you pay a very, very high premium for using electricity at key times of the day, but you get it cheaper other times. So we're moving towards timing-based pricing, and when it's like that, you might as well think about running your business at night. There'll be different taxes and different tariffs on different times of people using energy. So I think it's all very much up in the air.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. If you've enjoyed the video, subscribe on our website below, as there will be more videos on how to make major savings in energy use. Bye for now.